Assalamualaikum. My name is Amin Hamzah bin Sazali.
My name is Muhammad Shukri bin Haib.
My name is Nurai Natasha binti Sharifah Anwar.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Muhammad Hazib bin Jamil.
Firstly, I will briefly explain about the company that we choose for our case study. The company that we choose for our case study is a technology company which known as Apple. Apple is a stylish and innovative product which offer like iPhone, iPad and Mac computers. They are also create software like the iOS and Mac OS for their operating system and offer services like App Store and iCloud. Furthermore, Apple focus on making products that work well together and have a user-friendly experience. Besides that, for the purpose of comparison, for our chosen company, we have choose Samsung. Samsung is an electronic company that make lots of different things, such as smartphone like Galaxy series, as well as tablets, smartwatch, TVs. Furthermore, Samsung is known for being innovative and competing with Apple. They also make components like memory chips and display. Samsung is a well-known brand worldwide and focus on technology and design.
So I will continue the presentation for ratio and analysis between Apple company and Samsung company. So for solvency ratio, the current ratio for Apple is low compared to Samsung. In 2020, the ratio is 1.86, and 2021 1.07, and 2022 0.88, while Samsung is 2.79. For quick ratio, the Apple is still low compared to Samsung. The ratio in 2020 is 1.33, 2021 1.02, and 2022 0.85, while Samsung is 2.12. For cash ratio, in 2020 the ratio is higher compared to Samsung ratio, which is 0.86. But for the last 2 years, which is 2021 and 2022, the ratio is 0.5 and 0.31, which is lower compared to Samsung. For the net capital, the Apple have a negative ratio while Samsung has a positive ratio. So as we can see, Apple's solvency ratio are very low, which is mean that Apple has a high level of debt and low level of cash. This could make it difficult for Apple to meet its financial obligation during a downturn. In comparison, Samsung has a higher solvency ratio. This means that Samsung has a lower level of debt and a higher level of cash to solve the downturn problem. For the recommendation, first, Apple could pay down some of its debt, reducing its financial obligation and improving its solvency ratio. Second, Apple also could increase its cash and cash equivalent by improving its liquidity and solvency ratio. For the leverage ratio, the first ratio is total debt ratio. The Apple company has a higher ratio compared to Samsung. In 2020, the ratio is 37.8, 2021 38.9, and 2022 37.6, while Samsung only 3. For debt equity ratio, the Apple has a higher ratio compared to Samsung. In 2020, the ratio is 1.73, 2021 1.99, and 2022 2.39, while Samsung is 0.03. For equity ratio, Apple also has a high ratio compared to Samsung. In 2020, the ratio is 0.82, 2021 0.82 also, and 2022 0.77, while Samsung is 0.76. For long-term debt ratio, Apple has a higher ratio compared to Samsung. And in 2020, the ratio is 0.31, and 2021 also 0.31, and 2022 0.28, while Samsung is 0.01. For time interest rate, Apple has a lower compared to Samsung, which is good. In 2020, the ratio is 23.1, in 2021 42.2, and 2022 40.7, while Samsung is 56.85. So we can see that Apple financial leverage ratio are high compared to Samsung, which means that the company is using a lot of debt to finance for its operations. It could be a risky strategy, as it could make the company more vulnerable to financial distress if its sales or earnings decline. For recommendations, first, Apple could pay down some of its debt, which would reduce its financial leverage. Second, increase equity. Apple could increase its equity by issuing new shares or by retaining more earnings, which would also reduce its financial leverage. So I will pass to the next presenter.
We will wait for the comparison of efficiency ratio between Apple and also Samsung. So, under efficiency ratio, there are average collection period, inventory turnover, receivable turnover, fixed asset turnover, and total asset turnover. Here, we can see the good and bad at cross-sectional average collection period. Inventory turnover, fixed asset turnover, and total asset turnover of Apple are good than Samsung. So overall, Apple Incorporation efficiency ratio are relatively good compared to Samsung, with the exception of its receivable turnover ratio. This means that Apple Incorporation is using its asset effectively to generate revenue, but it could improve its receivable turnover by collecting its receivables more quickly. Here also are some recommendations for Apple Incorporation to improve its receivable turnover. Firstly, tighten credit terms. Apple Incorporation could tighten its credit terms by requiring customers to pay their invoices within a shorter period of time. This would encourage customers to pay their invoices more quickly, which would improve Apple Incorporation receivable turnover ratio. Second, offer discounts for early payment. Apple Incorporation could offer discounts for customers who pay their invoices early. This would encourage customers to pay their invoices more quickly, which would improve Apple Incorporation receivable turnover ratio. Lastly, by improved forecasting, Apple Incorporation could improve its forecasting by using more sophisticated tools and techniques. This would help Apple Incorporation to reduce its inventory levels, which would improve its receivable turnover ratio. Next, I will pass to the next presenter.
Next is profitability ratio. Apple company profitability ratios are all considered reasonable compared to Samsung, which means Apple generates much profit from its operations. Firstly is gross profit margin. Gross profit margin measures a company's profitability by comparing its gross profit to its revenue. A higher gross profit margin means that the company is keeping a high percentage of its revenue as profit. Apple company gross profit margin of 0.43 is considered to be good. This means Apple company keeps a high percentage of its revenue as profit. Samsung's gross profit margins of 0.37 is also considered to be good. Next is profit margin. Net profit margin measures a company profitability by comparing its net profit to its revenue. A higher net profit margin means that the company is keeping a high percentage of its revenue as profit after paying all of its expenses.
Apple company net profit margin of 0.35 is considered to be good. This means Apple keeps a high percentage of its revenue as profit after paying all its expenses. Samsung net profit margins of 0.18 is also considered to be good. Next is a return on total assets ROA. Return on total assets measures a company profitability by comparing its net profit to its total assets. A higher ROA means a company generates more profit from its assets. Apple company ROA of 28.29 is considered to be very good. This means that Apple company is generating much profit from its asset compared to Samsung's ROA, which is 10.3. Next is return on equity ROE. Return on equity measures a company profitability by comparing its net profit to its shareholder equity. A higher ROE means a company generates more profit from its shareholders' equity. Apple company ROE of 196.96 is considered to be very good. This means Apple generates much profit from its shareholders' equity compared to Samsung's ROE, which is only 70.1. Based on these profitability ratios, Apple is more profitable than Samsung. Apple has higher GPM, NPM, ROA, and ROE than Samsung. This means Apple can generate more profit from each dollar of revenue, assets, and equity. If you are looking for a company with solid profitability, then Apple is a good option for investment. However, it is essential to note that profitability is just one of factors to consider when making an investment decisions.
In conclusion, we can conclude that Apple has better profile and outcome based on the ratio and financial comparison data we have gathered, which likely lead us to choose Apple over Samsung. Thank you.